I'm going to turn the stage over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Haley. So I'm Charlene Stiles. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm an energy, metabolic, and women's empowerment coach. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's been my quest I've been in the health and wellness industry over the last more than 10 years now. So my philosophy is really pivoted to empower women. So that's one of the things that I wanted to do here today. And it's my hope that the information that I'm going to share with you from a natural health perspective can help empower you. I know most of you that are watching are women and have a business. So as an entrepreneur, or even anyone that's alive today, to come and show up as your best self is really it can catapult absolutely everything. So I understand from my perspective, dealing with health and wellness, that how good you feel also indicates how you show up. And oftentimes how good you feel is directly related to how good you look, or how good you think you look. As much as someone else may tell you how great you look, it's really an internal job about how you feel about yourself. So what I wanted to share with you today is hopefully some information that can, first of all, give you some background into if you are dealing with any kinds of imbalances in your life. Maybe it will give you a glimpse into why or how it's happening. And then hopefully I'm going to give you some tools that you can actually implement to get some changes and some results right now. So what I'd love to introduce you to is what I have coined the Wellness Trinity. So these are three things that are all intertwined and need to be regulated and dealt with synergistically, and at the same time, for us to have any kind of progress or see any kind of results, because these three things are so finely meshed together, just like we ourselves are an organism, and we have different processes and different systems that are happening simultaneously. We can't distinguish and separate one from the other, just like mind, body, soul cannot be distinguished. So nor can this wellness trinity that I'm going to be talking to you about today. And I'll just give you a bird's eye view right now. The three things that are interrelated that we need to address in any health aspect, particularly as we age and particularly as women, are inflammation, hormones, and digestive health or gut health. So that's where we're going to be going. But I just want to give you a little bit of background into that. I have been in this industry, as I said, for well over 10 years now. So predominantly dealing with women, and what happens over time is we age. So what was working for me and my clients 10 years ago, and what our health concerns were 10 and 15 years ago, are very different than what they are today. So if you can, just for a moment, like rewind 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what you were dealing with, what your objectives were, what was tripping you up back then versus today. So we women, as we age, I'm calling this getting into our prime years, because that's sexy, like it's glamorous, not middle age, our prime years. We have a accumulation of, well, there's lots of things that have happened, obviously, mentally, emotionally, physically, but our systems change. Not, of course, men's do as well. Their hormonal systems change, but ours change, I think, more predominantly and far more noticeably, going from reproductive years and child rearing years to menopause, and where we're not reproducing any longer. So all that to say, in my over 10 years time, the requests of my clients and the problems and health conditions of my clients have changed. And it often includes hormonal health, inflammation, and gut health, all being intertwined, but nobody talks about this. So what I see are these very common complaints. And what I've done, I hope you don't mind, I've encapsulated them down to 4. And there are kind of the 3 key things. And forgive me for this mass generalization, but it's just for reference point. So what most people's health concerns are, when they come to me, their pain points are they're tired, they're fat, and they're depressed. And then lastly is sick. So sick, fat, tired, depressed. And not, I mean, that is a blanket statement and very well generalized. But so when people are coming to me saying that they're tired, so first of all, they just don't have the energy that they used to. They're very fatigued. They don't have the motivation to get up in the morning. Their sleep is off. Their inspiration has also dipped. So I've classified that as just tired as a blanket. People aren't sleeping well, they can't sleep, their circadian rhythms are messed up, their sleep hygiene doesn't happen, or they're not sleeping at night, or they're up during the night, or they're falling asleep just when they need to get up. The next part is fat, and not people don't come to me and say, "Hey, I'm fat." Well, sometimes they do, but often it will be, I have this weight gain that I have tried absolutely everything, and it's so I can't do anything. So this stubborn weight that just won't, nothing will shift. They are exercising, and actually, they're not getting any results. So that what used to work for them is no longer working for them any longer. So they're carrying around additional, it may be weight, it may be inflammation, but they feel fat and just kind of overweight. And then the third thing of being depressed, not, and I don't mean clinical depression, but just like, not feeling like as motivated as you once were, brain fog, poor memory, lack of motivation, just kind of feeling maybe even down, or some deep downpression, but actually in some cases actual depression. So the joy has been kind of smothered. So those three things, and I'm just boiling it down to sick, fat, and depressed. Sorry, and tired. Sick is basically a bunch of other symptoms that show up, and it depends on what the imbalance is and how they arrive. So those blanket statements, just to give you an idea about this wellness trinity that we talked about. So these main three symptoms that people come to me with, fatigue, fat, and brain fog, they all fall under the wellness trinity. So those are all very common and the same symptoms if you have an imbalance in your gut health, in your digestion, in your hormonal system, or with inflammation. So those are all key markers. So when you come in looking for remedy for these symptoms, and you can't really pinpoint what they are, this is where the wellness trinity comes in, and we must address inflammation, hormones, and gut health together and synergistically, because like the body, they are all woven together. And we as no one really approaches it this way. We're just trying to deal with perhaps the symptoms. So when you go to your doctor or your healthcare provider, you're probably bringing up one or two or maybe three symptoms, and you're really trying to get at it that way. So it's my hope today that I can give you a little bit of background into this trinity, why it may affect you, and then some actual tools to implement. So let's dive in. When we're talking about inflammation, first of all, inflammation on its own is a good thing, right? You bang your knee, it creates pain, and it hopefully immobilizes you, and you stop using it, because that's the whole point of inflammation, of acute inflammation. Your body saying, "Hey, we need to heal, rest, and repair this. So please don't use this part of me until I have the capability of repairing it." So that part is actually good. It's the chronic inflammation that can be a real challenge. So chronic inflammation, you may not feel any symptoms whatsoever, in things like high blood pressure or diabetes. But if you do have some other chronic inflammation, there may be some indicators. So that may be some specific joint pain. You may have skin issues, acne, allergies. I guess the list can go on, go on and on. So we have the three common symptoms, plus these additional symptoms when you have chronic inflammation as well. So sadly, with inflammation, what happens is there's like little pockets of inflammation that are embedded into cells, into the body. And so it can be very deadly and actually quite silent damage that's being done. So if you take a look at little pockets of inflammation in vascular walls, that creates plaque, right? Which can be very traumatic if left unintended to. So all of this to say is inflammation, what it really does is it creates some metabolic metabolic havoc in the entire system. So you may ask, how does inflammation actually happen? Because maybe you're relating to some of these issues. So there are many contributors to inflammation over time. One of it is an accumulation over time. But one of the biggest variables and one of the key things that we have control over is our diet. So eating things like inflammatory foods. So the diet that creates inflammation are things like sugar, flour, trans fats, hydrogenated fats, anything with additives, preservatives, packaged foods, processed foods, GMOs, colorants, what else? Alcohol, caffeine, things with hormones that are embedded into them. So each one of these may have a different impact on you directly, but as I said, those are some very key and common offenders. And the big one being sugar. Sugar, sadly, is in just about every packaged food that there is. And sugar, as you may know, increases insulin. And I don't know if you know about insulin, but insulin is a fat storage hormone. So you see how we're already looped into this already. So we eat sugar, it creates inflammation. Inflammation creates fat. Fat fat creates inflammation. So it's really interesting with obesity is also a contributor to inflammation. So the more fat that you have creates more inflammation. So as pesky as fat can be, you know, it's taking up real estate on your body. It's also very metabolically active. So it's releasing inflammatory cytokines, which just means it's these little inflammation factories. So more fat on the body creates more inflammation, which makes it harder to burn fat, which creates more inflammation. See that cycle. Okay, so the next thing that's the contributor in this wellness journey that we need to address is hormones. Now, in this category, we still see the same common symptoms: the brain fog, the fatigue, the excess weight. But additionally, if you're having any hormone issues, you may notice things like you know, reproductive types of issues, so PCOS, heightened PMS symptoms, more significant menopause symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, mood imbalances, sleep dysregulation. Also, it can show up in your skin as well. So there are, while we're talking about hormones, another key thing is if with a hormone imbalance, your ability for cravings and the ability to sustain those. So cravings for food, but also mood, it can be impaired. So often when we talk about hormones, we often think about these sex hormones, but in fact, there's about 50 different hormones that control all kinds of things, from metabolism to growth, to reproduction, to development, to feeling satiated, to feeling a drive and motivation, love, sleep. So there's so much intertwined into hormone balance. But the key thing here is insulin. Again, insulin comes back to, there's not one hormone that regulates absolutely everything. There's a couple of key players, but again, it's a symphony that acts together in synergistic ways. So one of the key things that I deal with as a nutritionist, and particularly with food, is the regulation of insulin. And the reason I say that is not that it's the only one, but it's a key one in storing fat. So as I mentioned earlier, insulin is a fat storage hormone. So the more insulin that we have circulating, it reduces another hormone called IGF-1, and that is a hormone that helps burn fat and actually engage in what I would consider being an anti-aging hormone and a muscle repair hormone. So insulin also, when we have high levels of insulin, sadly, it increases inflammation. And what that does is it makes cells, fat cells, hard to lose their energy. So fat just stays in us. So we create, the fat cells just can't release their energy. So basically it messes up our hormone receptors and our ability to burn fat. Okay, so I hope that's enough about hormones. If you have gut health issues, you probably have the same common 3 symptoms that we talked about earlier. And on top of that, you may notice some, any kind of digestive upsets. So things that would affect your digestion, indigestion, gas, bloating, heartburn, acid reflux. Those are all real good indications that you may have some gut imbalances, or your digestive health may be needing some love and attention. So this Wellness Trinity, as I said, is what I work with and what I would suggest that you do too with your practitioner if you're dealing with any kinds of imbalances in the areas that we talked about, addressing them all together, because one affects the other. So if you have inflammation, it's guaranteed that you have some digestive problems, which then leads to hormone problems. So it doesn't matter where you enter this loop. This loop is affected, this trinity is affected as a whole. So if there's an imbalance in one area, as I mentioned before, there's an imbalance in the entirety. So the question then becomes, I would hope, how do we address this? So that's what I wanted to share with you today, a couple of key things that I think could help you. Now, obviously, I'm talking about a blanket kind of statement. So this is not the end all and be all, but I think it's a really good place to start as a DIY. Certainly talk to your doctor, your natural health care practitioner, a coach, someone like me, if you wanted to go further. But this is a place where you can start and things that are within your control. So we're going to talk about it from my perspective, of a holistic nutrition perspective. Okay, so the couple key things that we'll talk about are, one is fiber, adding more fiber to your diet. So fiber, as you know, comes from the undigestible part of plants. So fiber you'll find in fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. And what fiber does is it acts as a prebiotic for the good, healthy gut flora in your intestines. So not only is it creating good environment and friendly bacteria for your gut, it's also helping to move out and sweep out any metabolic debris, and particularly excess estrogen. So we're using this as like a sweeping mechanism. So when you increase fiber, it's really worthwhile to increase the amount of water that you consume in a day as well. So water, as you know, delivers nutrients to cells, but it also helps remove excess waste and toxins and debris and metabolic waste. So as we increase the fiber, this is going to be kind of drawing out the toxins. We need to like sweep it away so that it's just not circulating and creating more free radicals and more inflammation. So you need to flush it out. So a good rule of thumb for water is, if you take your body weight in pounds and divide it in half, that's the number of ounces that is a typical recommendation, rule of thumb recommendation. So for an example, if you weigh 150 pounds, you divide that in half, it's 75. So 75 ounces of water a day. If there's 8 ounces of water in a glass, roughly, let's just round it up to about 10 glasses of water a day that you would need. So the next thing would be cut out any inflammatory foods. So of course, you can reduce them. The best way, if you're trying to do a repair, is go in, get the renovation done, and get out. So if you're really trying to rectify a problem, is really take some time to cut out the inflammatory foods. As I mentioned earlier, different foods have different impacts on different people and their biochemistry. However, there are some of those common offenders that I can go over again, which are dairy, flour, sugar. These are the key offenders. Alcohol, trans fats, hydrogenated fats, colorants, additives, preservatives, processed foods, packaged foods. You're going to say, what am I going to eat? Alcohol, prescription medications, genetically modified foods. These are all generally inflammatory types of foods. So I'm sorry, I don't think I mentioned not just sugar, but particularly artificial sugars, very highly inflammatory to the system and to the gut lining. So you want to cut that out as well. The third point would be to add good quality fats to your diet. So you can certainly use like fatty fishes like salmon and trout. But you can also use supplementation if you're going in for that renovation and want to get the job done quick. That's a really great way. But in your foods, you can look at things like flax seeds, coconut oil, avocado, even olive oil. What you want to look for are foods that have a really high omega-3 component to them and less of omega-6. So without getting into the whole science of why oils are beneficial, it's going to help the Wellness Trinity, but the cell membranes and also your mental cognition, your brain function is really beneficial for good quality fats. So particularly omega-3s. The next thing you can do is reduce cortisol. Now, cortisol, you may know, is our stress hormone. So reducing cortisol would be a perfect way to help this entire overall trinity. So when we have low levels of sleep or poor sleep, our cortisol levels go up. Coffee also contributes to high cortisol levels. Hard exercise is also in its initial stage is it's a stressor. So as beneficial as exercise can be, the intensity is a stress. And if you think about what's happening when you're building muscle, if you're lifting weights, you're creating stress on the muscle so that it will rebuild stronger. So this is maybe something to question your level of intensity of exercise if you are dealing with any of these issues that we talked about in this Wellness Trinity. We'll go on to caffeine. Caffeine is probably one of these sticking points, but caffeine, what it does is it actually raises our cortisol or stress levels, stress hormone levels, and it reduces thyroid function. It can also impair our ability for digestion or suppress our ability to break down foods. So it can create gut imbalances and acid reflux. There's 2 more points. I'm going to speed through them. I know we're running out of time. Vitamin D is a really great, not only does it help boost immunity, but it really helps with gut health. And when we have low levels of vitamin D, it actually slows down our stomach emptying time, which creates more inflammation because of this fermentation that's happening inside of the gut. So vitamin D levels, I normally check them, but you can also just talk to your healthcare provider about what kind of supplementation may be required, if any, for vitamin D. Lastly, sleep is where all of the repair happens, improving the quality and quantity of your sleep. There's a plethora of ways that we can do that. You can certainly talk to someone like me or anyone else that you're knowing of that if you need some help in the sleep department. But all of that to say, I hope that there's 8 key tips that they give you an insight of how you can address the Wellness Trinity and balance your hormones, gain some more energy, and shed some weight. So thank you. I'm Charlene Stiles. Thank you. Where you can find me, is that what I need to say? Yes?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so
you.
much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.